do you think people actually think they know the right tools they need to be successful, or do you think they kind of rely on someone to kind of lead them forward to that success?
Oh, I'm not going to answer your question because I don't agree with the premise of the question. I want people who are self-managing. I do not want to have to tell people how to solve problems. I want people who breathe that solving problems is the oxygen that they need to survive. And because I don't want to micromanage people, but I want them to feel empowered that if they get stuck, they can ask for help. If they're not sure which way to go, they can ask for help. Certainly, when we do a migration, we have a designer, somebody who is very senior in the company that does the broad width of the attack plan. And they're the ones who do the migration plan. And everybody else has to march to that plan. But that's, if we're down at the micro level, we're wasting time. Everybody needs to have a broad view of the field and understand their place in the field, right? Without that, then how are they going to work collaboratively? How are they going to be successful? So we're one of our clients right now, we're doing a migration of a bunch of websites for them. It's a medical technology company. And they literally have 25, 30 people on meetings because they've got a web page that's part of their product. And there may be a team for the top of the page, a team for the middle of the page, and a team for the bottom of the page. I look at that and it's like, how could have whoever designed this, how could have they ever let that go? Which is why when we do a migration, it's a senior person. It's right now it's our CTO who does builds the migration plan, right? Because I can hold him accountable then. Why is this migration plan going off the rails? He's not running the migration plan. He's that then goes down to a group, and which is run by a director level, and they're the ones who quarterback the plan. But that also allows that if there's a problem with the plan, he doesn't have to go on site and visit the client, the CTO. He remembers, oh, this is what I saw. This is why I laid out the plan the way I laid it out. And so he can say, no, 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 you're not seeing it correctly. So then there's a back and forth, but there's also an escalation if people get stuck. But in the end, the people actually solving the problem, doing the migration or solving whatever the issue is, I want them to feel empowered so that they can solve that on their own as much as possible. And the way you do that is you don't just throw in, I mean, what I used to do is, and this was stupid when I was young and stupid, is like hand them a piece of hardware and say, install this. Install it where? Well, here's the client. Go install it at the client. And literally, that's what I would tell them. And they would, like, maybe a switch or a firewall or whatever. Uh, that's when, we were predominantly an MSP. And it was good because the people that stayed understood that they better know what they're doing. I wouldn't do that today because I think it's counterproductive and it wastes time. And there are other ways to tell if they're not up to the task. Mm. So it's some balance of creating the environment. It's all about creating the environment of success, right? And we're way too big and dealing with way too many large clients now that we could have that kind of off the cuff plan. We're dealing with, petabytes of data when we're migrating. We're dealing with large databases. We're dealing with thousands, in some cases, millions of connections. So that you got to have a plan for. And you can't just wing that. So I don't know how I went off on this tangent,
Don't
but uh, yeah, that's what, I mean, that's the whole goal, right? So I like disconnecting once in a while so that I can focus again when I come back. And so I like doing things like go to a yoga retreat and stand on my head because how many people my age get a chance to do that? And it was kind of cool. Um, I used to be not a fan of yoga. I used to be like, oh, that's silly. And now I'm like, wow, it's really cool because it'll change your posture. For me, it's changed my posture, and that's brought all sorts of health benefits.
100%.
Um, so on this retreat, I stood on my head for the first time, and I did a shoulder press for the first time. So that was awesome. So how was it? It was awesome. I pushed myself, which is what I love to do. And I learned some new things, which is what I love to do. And I did it in a beautiful place. So I got a chance to see the Black Beach and go see the volcano erupting. How cool was that?
That is pretty cool.
Uh, you know, so I'm blessed. Whatever. Life is wonderful.
I'm still waiting to receive my postcard, Richard. I haven't got it yet.
After this call, I will send you some emails of pictures that I'll send you a link to an album I have. It was just wonderful,
No,
wonderful.
I can imagine. I think even in terms of disconnected, I think that's why, although once we did our traveling, although it was mainly meant for work purposes, we kind of realized that we actually needed to decompress as well, because I think we've literally began. I can't remember the last time, for example, we actually had a solid week off. I mean, let me know if you
Hmm.
remember, just, but honestly, since we started the business, I can't remember.
Yeah. No, I think processing time. We're so used to at this point staring at screens so much that we're missing that you need some debrief. You need to get some distraction, intellectual distraction, and screens have made everything a very visual environment. So um, that's it's plus and minus, right? You used to have to think more because you were composing an email, and now you can have a bot write your emails for you in roughly your context.
Yeah.
It's not the same, and it's not the quality, but you get more done. So that's the trade-off. But we're very visual and a very go-go. And in our world, you always have to be precise. Like if you're not precise, you're dead. Everything from, I plugged the cable into the switch. Into what switch? What port of what switch? What's the other end of that plugged into? Is it fiber or is it Cat 6? Is it, did you provision the port? I mean, there's a million questions that then occur because in an engineering world, you have to be precise. Otherwise, it's a lack of clarity. And in fact, I just had to let somebody go because they couldn't get to that level of preciseness. And that causes problems. That causes miscommunication. So
Thank you for sharing that insight. And I think that's why, in case you haven't realized, we had to start the recording early, because I know from when we actually done our last podcast, you gave us such wisdom before. I was like, you know what? I'm not missing it this time. We're going to press record
yeah.
and we're just going to go live straight away.
Yeah. we like how organic it is. So we thought, let's just click the button, record.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I mean, if it helps people, I'm happy to it. The reason I want to do these is to differentiate what we do versus what everybody else does. And how do you get that across? Well, you've got to be genuine. If you're not genuine, you're dead. And if you're a robot, don't get on social media and don't do podcasts because it's boring. And so I always, the podcast I like to listen to is where I'm learning something. So I like to teach because I've been doing this all my life. I've been literally a technologist since I was 13 years old. So I have a very different perspective than most people. You guys are stuck with Facebook and the internet, right? That has nothing to do with technology. Those are just things we've decided as a society to pay attention to. And that's brought us um, a lot of benefit and some horrible results, right? But every
Mm.
technology, there's always, you go back to the Model T and when it first started to go, the roads were all dirt. There was, 4 decades between the Model T and the interstate when there were true interstates and with pavement and everything else. So we've got what, 30 years of Facebook. So we need another 20 years to figure it out.
So, Richard, you did just mention that obviously with technology, there's been, you take the good with the bad and vice versa. But I'm
Mhm.
intrigued. You did say you essentially started getting into tech when you were 13. So, what actually got you interested in technology?
What got me interested in technology? It was the ability. I mean, the first technology device I played with was a Texas Instruments SR56 programmable calculator. And it was just cool that I could put numbers in and write a program. It had it had a register, it had memory, it had a little tape drive that you could stick in and stick out, and it would record. I'm sorry, that was the SR59. The SR56 didn't, and that was my first one. And then I sold that and bought an SR59, which had storage that was connected to it. I mean, this goes so far back, it used a cassette drive as storage. And you would actually press record and then say export, and it would write the program out to a cassette tape. The SR59 had a mag strip that you could go in and out. You can Google them. They were back in the day. They were pretty awesome Texas Instruments programmable calculators. But the fact that I could put in an equation, and I was just at that age that in math where we were starting to get into equations, it was pretty amazing. Um, and then I'm a kid from the lunar lander days, and when people were actually landing on the moon, which we're getting into that again. But I wrote a little game called Lunar Lander, which used a basic equation that I got from some book somewhere. Um, and I was able to program it, and I sent it to Texas Instruments to they had a book that would come out every month if you belonged to the group for the SR56, 59 calculator. And they published it. They published my game. And wow, that was an addiction. I mean, that high of, wow, I did something that people actually recognize. Uh, that was really cool. And once that happens, that's the rush is, you mean, I actually did something that's like amazing. Okay, cool. Let me do it again. Um, and so, my whole life has been about what obstacles people had. I mean, I wrote the first Windows. Novell networks used to be a big deal. I wrote the first Windows 1.0, Windows 1 interface for Novell networks. The first program that would imitate or redo Syscon, P console, F console. I just thought there's got to be an easier way to design or control networks other than DOS. And it was cool. And before that, or just before that, I started as a tech. So as a kid, I had the experience of the SR56. And then a little bit later, I got into having a BBS, which was the precursor to the internet and forums, where you actually could have 8 people or 9 people logged in at the same time, and you could share programs, and you had to have 8 phone lines. And I did that at my grandparents' house, and they didn't understand why I needed 8 phone lines. Because and noise in the middle of the night. And then I needed storage because I had an Atari 800 computer, which really dated me. And so the only way I could get storage was through mainframe floppies. So I connected a mainframe floppy to a Atari 800, and then I would have at the time what seemed like unbelievably large amounts of storage. But I've always been weird. I mean, I'm creative that way. And I could tell you on the Atari, there were times that I wanted to understand what was going on with the screen and why was it glitchy at times. And I realized that on a monitor, there's what's called a raster, right? It's the line that draws the image. Not on LEDs. I'm talking about tubes, right? That, when you had a TV or a monitor that was a tube. Well, there's what's called a V-blank interrupt, which goes from the lower right-hand corner when the beam goes up. So if you've ever taken a picture of an old monitor, you like see half an image. Well, that's because your eye, there was nothing wrong with the image, but when you're taking a picture of a monitor, you're only getting what is drawn in that millisecond that you were taking a picture. Your eye, it doesn't go that fast as a shutter or a photograph does, so that you're looking at a screen, you see the whole image. Well, it turns out that that's one line at a time drawn. And there's like 63 milliseconds from the time the beam is in the lower right-hand corner till it's in the upper left. And so I wrote a little assembly language program in 6502 assembler that would play a tune. It would poke some registers. It would look at what was currently in the registers because you didn't want to blow the program up. And so it would store that, poke some registers, move some bits around, restore everything that was there. And then if you did that enough times, you got free programming. And so I used to play stupid tunes that I would write in background, and people would say, what is your machine doing? I said, it's playing music. So that was cool. From there, I mean, that's when I was really a kid. Like I was 16, 17. And then my first real job was as a tech for a Metrotech Communications. They did the very first versions of the subway signs that said next train 3 minutes, next train 5 minutes. And the company was a small company in Queens, and they were run by a double E, but he didn't know communications. And of course, I had all this BBS knowledge, and so I understood communications. And he was smart in that he had put a 6502 ACIA, a chip on the board to communicate to the board. But he didn't know how. He wasn't a software guy, so he didn't know how to make the chip work. So I took X modem was a protocol used to be really famous that would send packets. You'd encrypt the packet, and at the end of the packet, you'd put all the numbers of the bits added up, and it was called a checksum. And that was the quick way to say, did I get the data correct? Right? You'd add up the bits in the packet and you'd look at the checksum. If they matched, boom, you got good data. And so what I did was take that, and 512 was the 256, 512 were the block sizes we started with. And then some signs were in some really bad places. So then I did a scaling protocol where I took X modem and I took it down to 32 bits. So it would first try 512, then 256 and 128, then 64. and it would go all the way down to 32. And at 32, it would error out and say, you got to repair it. The connection's too bad. And that worked. And that's how the very first signs for the New York City subway system would get the message that the train's coming. From there, I went to AdSat, which was a satellite telecommunications company, when Madison Avenue used to beam ads to different printing houses across the country. And they were all run by a Novell network. And that company got bought by U.S. News and World Report, and then I went there. And from there, I started my own company. I reached my level of incompetence when I was, they would acquire a company and I was doing the evaluations of the technology, if it could be used. And here I am at 25, 26, telling 50-year-olds you're out of work. And that felt like crap. So I didn't want to do that. And then I started my own company. And that's when I did the syscon, pconsole, left console. And we were really doing well until 9/11. And 9/11 really changed my world because it made larger companies uncomfortable to deal with smaller companies because they could, I had like Carrier air conditioner and the federal government as clients. And that whole market just went, it's gone. And so we became an MSP. I turned the company into an MSP, and we were an MSP for a long time, and then did custom programming for people, systems. And I've always enjoyed programming and solving problems, and we still do programming. I got a whole programming group. But that led to the MSP side, led to hosting. The hosting led to DevOps. The DevOps led to SaaS infrastructure engineering. And that's the company we are today, is because we have this whole history. And I have a group of people that, for whatever reason, they don't quit. I don't want them to quit, but we're at 70 people now. And for the most part, people stay for long periods of time. And so that's great for me because I've got ADHD and ADD, both. And so I'll talk to people about 4 different projects within a sentence and they can keep up with me. And that's great. That's like the ultimate level of efficiency. And they see the thread of why I'm thinking and talking about those 4. It makes my CTO nuts a little bit sometimes, but he knows how to handle it. So that's where, and I'm always grateful. I mean, I'm really grateful that everybody is here and they do it, because if they don't do their job, then I have to do it, and I don't want to do it. I want to do my job. So that's where, that's my whole checkered story. And
what story is, because one thing I can say is definitely littered with achievements, and even your 70-person team now, especially, I can imagine this must be more family orientated as well, where everyone can actually rely on each other. And honestly, that's very inspirational, and that's something that me and Josh hope to achieve one day, and that's for sure.
People they motivate most people, right? They take a salary or get a piece of the business or both, and that's confirmation that they're doing something. But really, people want to have impact and have a difference. And most people work for something greater than themselves. And they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. So that's the kind of people that I want to work with, is because sometimes you got to work some really hard hours in our world, right? If there's a large client of ours down, you're talking about millions, possibly billions of dollars of data that you've got to get from point A to point B, and it better work. Or you have a lot of people using our clients' applications that are upset.
Yeah.
That's reputation damage. And that can happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I got to have people that I trust. And to do that, that means they really have to be top notch. They've got to have the drive. They've got to, first of all, they have to be problem solvers, because you can't teach that. You just can't. What you can teach is that every problem is an onion, and you got to peel the pieces away until you find what is the core thing that if you fix will take care of 70% of the problems.
Mm.
And then you find out what's around the core and you fix those. And that'll take care of the next problem you find will take care of another 10%. And then the problem after that will take care of another 6%. And finally, you'll get to 100%, but it's always a law of diminishing returns as you put the onion back together again. That's typical the way problems work. Problems should always triangulate. So you should always start out wide, and as you solve problems, they get closer and closer and closer in until boom, you're there.
So, so Richard, how do you find a good problem solver?
Who's curious? You listen during an when I'm doing it. I mean, if they're for tier 4, then I'm involved. I want to talk to the person, because that's somebody who could really hurt the company's reputation. So that's somebody I want to meet and talk to. I am not the decision maker, and I don't want to be the decision maker. That's why I have people. But I do want to hear and feel if they have the right voodoo in their heart. What motivates somebody? And you ask them, what's their story? What do they do? What are they passionate about? And I ask bizarre questions like that, because, you can only get so much from a resume. It's what keeps you up at night. What's your ideal job? Those are the things that I want to know when I'm interviewing somebody. Is this the ideal place for them? Now, if you want to be dictated to and have no creativity, this is a crappy place to work. And that's not a knock. Like, there are people who just want to do 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, and this is their world. And when they're off, they want to be off. I get that. That's not this world. And so I don't want to pretend it is. And if I pretend it is, even, I really like the guy and maybe this will work out. No, it doesn't work out. It's never going to work out, because you can't compromise people. If that's what somebody's core value is, that they need to leave at 5 o'clock every day. I'm not saying that they don't have childcare issues once in a while. Everybody has that's life. But I'm talking about, what's your priority? What drives you? Are you driving to a close on solving a problem? And you can hear that in how people look at problems. How do they think about their car? How do they think about, if it's a guy with a car that he's working on, like we have an engineer who had a Subaru WRX, and he was tweaking it, and he just couldn't wait until he got some time off to tweak it. So he knew how to drive to a close, right? Because he had something he wanted to do. He knew where to get the information. He knew where to get the parts, and he put it in, and he souped up his WRX. So that's the same drive. I mean, it has nothing to do, in the example I'm giving, has nothing to do with technology. It's personal car, but that's the cool part. You can't teach that. That's the whole premise of what I'm saying. You gotta interview. And so, but if you've got somebody who wants to close and wants to learn, so the first thing is, do they know their own limits, right? I'm going to back up. The first thing is they have to have the curiosity. The second thing is, do they know their own limits? In other words, can they ask for help? Are they collaborative? That, to a large degree, you can teach. because you can create a climate that it's okay to ask questions. It's alien to most engineers, and it's alien to the way we think of engineering. But actually, engineers can be some of the most gregarious communication people that you'll ever know. Because they're fascinated. Really good engineers are fascinated by what they do. And here's a quick tip. How can you tell somebody is a good engineer or not? If they can explain something in simple terms, that's a good engineer. If they go to buzzwords, they're full of it. Move on, like real quick. So did I answer your question?
Richard, you certainly did. Took me on a roller coaster,
Okay.
but it was worthwhile.
Okay. I go, that's the way my mind works, goes all the way around. But that's why I like doing these podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Because this is where I can differentiate what our company does, Protected Harbor, and how we look at problems.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so easy in our world to say it's the programmer's fault, or it's IT's fault, or it's the database administrator's fault. It's so easy to blame. And how does that help the customer? How does that solve any problems? As soon as you're pointing fingers, you're creating a climate of conflict. How about you say, you know what, we can make some improvements here or here, but I need your help. I've gone to administrators and say, this database is not an HA. And some of them will not even know what HA is, right? If you have a small company of 50, 60 people and they've got their second or third small application that's a SaaS, and maybe they have 10,000 clients, 20,000 clients. For them, that's their whole world. That doesn't mean that programmer knows what HA is. So then you have the conversation. Hey, this database seems to be really important, is it? Oh, yeah, it's really important. Okay. Can we make sure that it's always on? Oh, well, we do. We run a copy here and a copy there. Yeah. And I said, but if we take down this server, then it's offline. Oh, yeah, but if we use HA, you can have that database always stay up, and we can have the system point to which database server is up or not. And that will allow us to do maintenance. Oh, that'd be a great thing to add, but it's probably really hard. Well, no, it's not that hard. You point to the listener, and then the listener will direct and connect for you. And all of a sudden you have an ally, right? So instead of saying, hey, technical people are infamous for saying end users are stupid. Well, they're not stupid. They're end users. They're not trained in what you're doing. The programmer who was never trained, he was trained to solve problems. He was never trained to understand how database structures work. In an ideal world, would he understand? Absolutely. And because I'm old, I insist all my people look at the world in a wide view, because we live in a world of information silos where the database administrator knows the database inside and out, doesn't know anything about the storage that the database is sitting on. And the storage administrator knows the storage, but knows absolutely nothing about Windows, or Linux, which is where the app is actually running. And the web administrator knows exactly how to lay out the app, but doesn't know anything about databases or firewalls. And the security officer knows firewalls and he knows how to set the rules, but doesn't know anything about databases. So we've now, and I understand why it had to be done that way, because we don't teach in a broad view. We need to teach vertically because the people teaching it only understand this much, and you've got to get tested on this much. So God forbid we ask them to think about this much. I've just learned that the only way to really understand problems is you step back and look at the broad spectrum. And then you can say, holy crap, look what's common about these problems. So we walk into an environment where it could be pretty toxic, where the programmers have done the initial deployment and the company got bigger and bigger, and now the app is crashing and the programmers are blaming IT and IT is blaming the programmers, and they're both blaming the database administrators or they're blaming the firewall administrators. Depends on the app and what the core of the app is. And our job is to look at the environment and fix it. So for one client, they literally had no pools of web servers. They had a series of web servers, and this is a medical app. And so for client A, and they've got, I don't know, a couple hundred clients, good sized firms. But yet company A, their web pages, their app, the web pages that were driving the app were on 1, 2, 3 servers. And then company B was on server 1, server 2, server 4. Company C, server 1, server 4, server 8. So you couldn't take server 1 down without talking to 3 different companies. To me, that's moronic. You've created an environment, right? It's running, but you can't do a critical failure. You can't do maintenance because you're just going to cause reputation damage. So what do? You keep everything running all the time. And so what happens? Well, people who don't plan like that generally have holes, which ransomware then comes in and infects, which is what happened in this case. So our job is we're moving them to our environment, and we're doing the DevOps repair of the design all in one shot. So now when you have a client, they're on one or a group of servers. And then we talk about deploying a pool. So we could actually pull out a web server, do maintenance on it, and bring it back into the pool. But then the app has to be stateless. So then we have to have a conversation with the programmers. Hey, do you think in the next version or the version after we could possibly make this a stateless app? And so there's like a whole music that has to go on where you don't go from 0 to completion in a week. It's not like poof. You don't put it in a box and fix it, because every solution has to be customized to that client, and it's got to be part of a roadmap of durability. Certainly, we can have a massive impact in 30 to 90 days. Massive, because the grossest problems we're going to be able to take to repair. Like I said, when you're peeling the onion away, that very first thing that you do to fix the onion, that's going to take 60%. So that is going to be pretty obvious where to go. Then the rest, to get to 100% perfect and a wonderful deployment, that could take a year, maybe even 2. Because now you've got to build consensus with people, and you've got to ask people. You have to educate, you have to build trust, where people will argue with you and say, oh, no, you're wrong there. How about we look at it in a different way, right? Let's not talk about wrong or right. Let's talk about what's good for the app, which is what's good for the company. Right? Take the focus, shift the focus. So part of what we do, we solve problems, right? But it's a therapeutic solution. It's therapy in computers. And the only way I can do that is to have a lot of collaboration on our side and with the client. I've had a CEO of a large client of mine say, it's awesome because I can't tell the difference between your people and mine. And I'm like, exactly. That's harmony. That's the ultimate level. And why do I want that? Because that builds the longest, most durable relationship with a client. It's also the easiest to maintain. It's the easiest to grow, right? If you've got that kind of relationship, why would they give the work to anybody else? So it's a win-win. But we don't it's we don't think that way very much anymore. It's kind of old school. But honestly, that's the only way I know how to think, which is why we've had almost no salespeople, because everybody's word of mouth with us.
Hmm.
Hey, you got this problem? These are the people who can fix it. But now we're getting, bigger, and it's time to grow. So we got to do podcasts.
I love it. And Richard, you've spoke about AI drift and why humans still need to stay involved. Could you
Mhm.
explain what AI drift actually is?
Whoa, man, yeah, it is a benefit and a curse. Right now, it's a great assistant. And so if you understand the material you're asking for help on, you can do a lot. I mean, Claude and OpenAI Codex are great tools for vibe coding,
Mm.
and there's others. Those are the two biggies. I'm less comfortable with when you dictate and it's going to build the entire app for you. And the reason I'm less comfortable is when I've looked at the infrastructure components, it doesn't particularly understand what good infrastructure or bad infrastructure is. So I've watched some Claude and Codex created apps, and when I look at how it handles security, I'm like, whoa, this is going to be easy to attack. Because how does it know? It's looking at the world of all source code out there. And when you suck that in, you're good, garbage in, garbage out. And there could be a lot of good code, but all it takes is 2 or 3 bad pieces of code, and now you're going to have a polluted environment. So it's a great tool. It can help. It certainly can help with debugging, and it can definitely help with optimization. There are limits, and it'll make us, we're going to go through several cycles. Companies are going to say, because it's buzzwords, that we're using AI more. And I think you're going to find some companies backing out, like Facebook announced that all of their data centers that they've been buying for quote unquote their AI project, they're now going to resell because they don't know how to use AI in their environment and how is it going to help. And I think you're going to have some of that. It's going to go back and forth. The other thing about AI that's cancerous is right now it's a really good assistant. Well, if it's an assistant, that's where college graduates go, right? That's where people coming into the industry, they get that first level programmer, first level solution provider. That's where they learn the words. And if you're now replacing that person with AI, how do you train the next generation? Now, right
That's a
now,
good point.
because we live in a short-sighted world, nobody cares, right? You're not going to see that as a problem for 5 to 8 years when the next generation starts to age out. And all of a sudden, everybody moves up and, oh, wait a minute, there's nobody at the bottom. And you say, oh, well, AI will do it. Yeah, no, because AI is only going to get you here. You need to go here. We need people to go this step. So, but where it can help you is you could have a programmer writing and processing multiple changes to an app or to a series of apps simultaneously, because he can vibe code one section and then switch, vibe code another section, then switch, and send each one to testing to evaluate after he does his initial test, or her or them does their initial testing. And so there's really smart ways to use it. And then there's ways that aren't so smart. I mean, we use AI internally if I want to see if the engineers are problem solving, if clients are upset, I get a report on what's the verbiage. If the verbiage indicates that this customer is upset, that's going to give a high score. I want a human to go take a look at it and see what happened. Is the AI correct? And if it's not correct, then I want to train on it. But we do things differently than most. We use our own models and on our own hardware, because I don't want the stuff that we do then in the greater AI internet and sucked up by Anthropic or OpenAI. I don't know what happens to it from there. Yes, they have corporate accounts. We don't do that. Nonsense. That's what they say now, until they find that, oh, we forgot to throw this security switch in. Oh, I'm sorry. Your data was stolen. And of course that's going to happen, because we don't teach security and we don't value data and we don't treat it like money. If I did this experiment at a client. Put $100 bill on the table. How fast is it going to be there? Not very fast. It's going to go. Put a thumb drive. Leave a thumb drive out. The thumb drive could be 100 times valuable. People say, oh, I don't know. What's on there? I don't know. Take a look. We value money or a credit card because we understand intuitively the value. We don't value a thumb drive in the same way, although the value of it could be 100 times what the paper money or the credit card has. And so, that's just a matter of time. But because we don't value it, we don't think about security, and everything. A lot of the infrastructure we use today is still based on the 1970s and 80s, which was, we trust everybody. What's FTP? FTP is, we trust everybody. Okay, so now we have SFTP. FTP is file transfer protocol. SFTP is secure file transfer protocols. It's still transferring the same data, but now we're going to encrypt it. Okay, but that means if I tap into the encryption, I can get in. Any system can be bypassed and broken. And the more complicated we make things, the easier it is. I'll give you an example. There's a hotel. I was in Hawaii, and I went to a friend of mine was checked in, and we went upstairs to drop some stuff off in their room, and we forgot the key in the room. We went downstairs, and I said, I need a replacement key for room 1050. Okay, hold on a second. Here you go. And they reprogrammed it. They didn't ask me who we were. It was totally different people at the front desk. They had no idea. So I could have asked for anybody's key. And nobody ever checked. Why? Because they have a console app that they use. When somebody walks in the door, they've got their iPads and they script it. And so they're not thinking about security. That's the iPad's job, is to think about the security. They know they're programming the key, right? The front desk person. And I'm not knocking the front desk person. I'm just saying, here's the reality of the world. If this was old school and somebody actually had to go through the process at the front desk, there would be training Do not give out keys without looking at somebody's ID and confirming that the room they're getting matches the reservation. But because we've now got a lot of bulk, Expedia and all that, now there's a layer. And then past that, now everything is online. Here's my web portal. I just put in the information. The web portal takes care of everything. And so I've added another abstraction layer. So that allows me to just walk up and ask, hey, my key's bad. Can I have a new key? By the way, it's room 1050. Oh, sure. And they don't want to take the time, right? Because they got a million other things to do. So I look at things like that, and you realize that there's holes in everything we do. Right. So, but that was just from my vacation. So that's how weird I am. All right. I'm on vacation and I'm like, there's a hole in this process. Right? But I see it all the time. I mean, literally all the time.
Richard, I would love to continue this conversation, but given where time is, I think we're going to need a part two. Like, true, I think we need a part two. We'll discuss off camera, of course, but I just wanted to say, like,
Okay.
thank you so much for sharing, your experience, your perspective, in and around technology, your story, and also artificial intelligence.
Right.
For our viewers that are listening and wanted to find out more about Protected Harbor and yourself, where can we direct them to go?
Protectedharbor.com, and it's Richard, Luna, at protectedharbor.com. And Robert or one of the sales guys will generally respond. I'd love to help companies with their SaaS infrastructure problems. It's, nothing is a greater satisfaction than making a difference. And I said that I like people internally that work for something greater than themselves. Well, that includes me. And that includes solving problems that I can't tell you the number of times I've had clients say, no, everybody said nobody can solve this problem. That's just like, for me, that's like meat to a dog. Like, just let me at it. Right? That's the jazz. That's what life is. That's the grist of life. You're telling me that I had a client once tell me Microsoft and a couple of other companies came in and they said, there's no better way to do this 24-hour process they had. And I said, I know what you're doing. Nonsense. And we got that same process down to 8 hours, which they still use today. It has to do with reconciling all these tiny little files that they deal with. That's the funny thing. And the whole world is based on tiny little files that go around. There's just billions of them.
Do you reckon if you went back to it today, you can get it down in less than 8 hours?
Sure. Yeah, because I would use different techniques than we did then. That was 3 years ago. They're thrilled with it. So they don't want us to, they're not going to pay for us to make it 4 hours.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that we live within the constraints of what the programmers can do and the data that's available. So in that case, what we're doing is we're sucking data out of a Microsoft SQL server and bringing it into a data lake and then processing it within a data lake, because data lakes are really good at large scale. It's what AI is based on. It's large scale processing. And data lakes were in its infancy when we started to work on that. So there are other techniques that we could use today that would be different, and they would get us down probably 25, 30% where we are today, but it's not worth it, right? That's not worth $100,000 to that client or $50,000 to that client. So the next client that comes and says, hey, I got this problem, if that approach and algorithm is the right way, then that's what we will apply. And that's what we'll build out. But the cool thing is, I love these kind of oddball frustration SaaS infrastructure problems, because that's where we can add value, a lot of value to our clients. And you do that once with one client, you have a partner for life. We're hard to find, but once we're proven, oh my gosh, it's over.
That's
Right?
it.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, as Josh said, it's been a wonderful conversation, and my new kind of nickname for you is Richard, the problem solver.
There you go. I'll take it. I'll take it.
We really do appreciate your time, Richard, and that's been another episode of the Navvai Shift, folks. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.